All right. Hello, everybody. This is one of my uh, really favorite things in scrolls, just the marginalia. So um, I'm Alikina Filia Elpin. I'm from the Outlands. If anybody needs to get a hold of me, I will be happy to put some of my contact information in the chat at the end of class. And a year or two ago, might be 2 years, it hasn't been that long, but I'm one of those people that's capable of completely mixing up how much time has been not that long. But a couple years ago-ish, I decided that I like marginals enough that I really ought to start teaching everybody else because I think they're cool. And I love them as something that can be used in scrolls. Now, I don't have a lot of um, images of SCA scrolls, so that is one thing that I hope to add. So if you see me teaching this class at a future date, there may be more pictures. I will be using screen share to show you guys some pictures of um, period marginalia. And we'll be talking about how this can be used in um, SCA scrolls because that is kind of where we do a lot of the most scribal work. Most of us that do a lot of calligraphy and illumination, we do a lot of scrolls for people. It's not that we don't do other things, write down favorite poems or um, put song lyrics together for a friend or copy out something just like it was done in period, but we do a lot of scrolls. So when I'm looking at um, medieval art, I do have a strong tendency to start looking at how can this be used in things I do in the SCA to kind of describe what marginals or marginalia is or are. Um, I'm going to go back and forth on that is and are bit terrible. Please don't tell anybody who's super into grammar. When we break down a basic SCA document or even just a basic medieval document, you first have the words. You've got the lettering. And most of that is going to be describing or writing whatever's there. If it's a book of prayers, if it's a gospel, if it's a book of hours, it's going to have that prayer or psalm or text. Anything that is not part of the official text is, if it's written stuff, then it is a written piece of marginalia. And then we've got the artwork surrounding this. And so we have, again, different pieces in medieval artwork that are not marginalia. If we have borders, those are one of the most common things that we see in medieval art. A border is not typically marginalia. We have illuminated capitals. Again, those are not marginalia, even if they have something interesting going on. If a capital has a person or an animal doing something that is relevant to a story or to something being either mentioned in the text or to the person that it was for, then it was historiated. It's telling a story. Otherwise, it's an illuminated capital. It's decorating what's going on. And then finally, there is illumination that just kind of serves to either illustrate the point, which was especially common in any areas where the population was not as literate. If you were going to have people looking at, say, a gospel who did not have um, a good way to read it, or if everybody's maybe could read and write some English or French or whatever from back then, but not Latin, and you're seeing something in Latin, there was a good chance that they were going to have some pictures of what was going on. Those are also not marginalia. So what is? Marginalia is, as the name suggests, typically things along the edge. They're also things that are not directly, absolutely necessary to the text and the illumination, but they make it oh so fun. They're interesting. They give us amazing insights into what's going on. And they serve as, for us looking back at this, just a lot of, what were people thinking? What was funny to them? What was relevant? For people at the time, this is kind of the medieval comic or the medieval meme. You see repeated motifs, you see comments by the people who were doing this, you see little things that were just meant to be funny or silly. You also see kind of ongoing stories, and there are some things that are hard to tell. Can we classify this as marginalia or is it some other part of the illumination? And ultimately, it doesn't matter a whole lot. Um, if you are working on, an art history degree and want to define it very clearly, that's great. But for those of us uh, kind of doing this as scrolls, if you're looking at something and it inspires you, fantastic. Be inspired and add it in. So we have two major categories. We've got written and we've got illuminated or art. I'm going to talk about the art first. Marginalia, I break it down into about four categories: informative, meaningful, storytelling, and ridiculous. Other people may break it down into more or less. This is kind of my categories. Informative is giving you some pieces of information that may relate to other things that were going on at the time. And this could be similar to when we today look at stuff that we've been reading, say, in the internet, and somebody has a handy little cartoon that's funny or is relevant to politics or um, some bit of news that's going on. It can also be things that are just personal to them. Meaningful is going to very much overlap that. We're going to get into what is super relevant to that person. So if this is being say, a book made for Lady Mary, and Lady Mary loves butterflies and the color blue and tulips, there's a good chance that the person doing the illumination may put in just little bits in the margins of a woman in blue praying or sitting on a bench or climbing a tree or whatever, or some tulips or some butterflies. So things that are meaningful to the person who is receiving it or to what's going on in general. And that can also be things that relate to the text, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a moment. Then we have storytelling. And storytelling is very much overlapping that meaningful and informative. It can be pieces that come directly from the text. And one of the things that scribes like to do was puns or kind of plays on what was going on. If there is a um, a piece of the text that has a word with a double meaning, they may choose to put some of that into the marginalia. If there is an ongoing thing, and this we see more in books than in single page documents. So in the Middle Ages, we get a lot more of this, and there's actually a term. I'm going to butcher this badly. I don't speak French, but it's bas de page, or it's spelled Basdepage, and it means that it's this ongoing story at the bottom. So there's one manuscript that has these images of kids playing. One, they're playing kind of like ball, one, something that looks like jacks or dice, one where they're doing tug of war at in the bottom of each page. Finally, we have the category of ridiculous. This is the one that you will see if you were to right now Google medieval marginalia. Chances are they would mention some of the things that are ridiculous. That can range from naughty to whimsical to comments that are silly or humorous, but they're intended to be funny. They're not intended to uplift. They're not intended to be super meaningful. They're not intended to tell a huge story. Whether they're personal to the person receiving it, we usually don't know. Uh, we're able to tell things like if we have uh, a recipient of a lovely book of hours, and we have other things that belong to her, and we know that she likes tulips and she has many things that are blue. Okay, we would know that those things were related to her. If there was an in joke that people knew about her or something funny that had happened and that got put in the marginalia, and we're looking at it now saying that's just a thing or that's in the ridiculous side, we might never know. And that is something that is okay to do with our scrolls, keeping in mind the audience, not just the person receiving it, but the entire SCA and anybody who might be seeing it. All of those can also be done in words. So we will be getting to the written parts. Now, some of the other terms that you may hear for these are doodles or drolleries. Uh, there are glosses, which is where somebody else has come in later and written some things in using the margins. And so one of the things that was expected in the Middle Ages and expected all the way until the Victorian era was that people would write in the margins, that they would put their thoughts or would clarify a phrase or would um, come in and put in information about a term or a description. The reason that stopped is because in the Victorian era, lending libraries of just books for the populace to read were becoming more common, and libraries did not want to receive their books coming back with various thoughts and scribbles and drawings and whatever that people found interesting. So libraries really pushed for the idea that when you borrow a book, you bring it back, it does not have stuff written, and kind of by extension, we don't write in books. Up until that time, having people write anything and everything, but especially um, commentary on maybe something in the Bible. This verse relates to another chapter and verse in the Bible, or this phrase wasn't spelled correctly. It really ought to be this. Those kinds of things were expected to be there. And that's one of the things that we see in medieval manuscripts is some of these very wide borders, which is kind of, you look at it and you're saying, okay, this is vellum. They're trying to use vellum and parchment. The definition there, vellum specifically comes from calf skin. You can remember that vellum and veal related words. Parchment is from any animal. So vellum is a type of parchment, but also goat, sheep. In the modern day, I know somebody in the shire I live in who makes some lovely parchment from pronghorn that are hunted in the fall. And, you know, there's only so many pronghorn skins that people can use. She makes magnificent parchment. So when you've got to do this by hand, and up until the towards the end of the 15th century in Europe, pretty much what was written on was parchment. And then we see these big wide borders with nothing in it or with just art. Why are they doing this? Because it was expected. So some of the things that we see in the margins are not going to have been done by the initial scribe or the initial illuminator. Sometimes we're going to know that because it's going to be signed and very clear. Sometimes we will know it's the original artist because they're going to have noted that. Other times we may not. We might guess that it looks like a separate style, but we may not know for sure. So, I explained it all. You can all go home. No, there's so much more fun stuff. Looking first at some of the pieces that are informative, interesting, and ridiculous all at the same time. How's that as a 2-for-1, 3-for-1, whatever? There is no shortage of being able to find really great pictures in the internet. Now, being able to find exactly the one you want to prove that, yes, they did this thing, or to give an example so that you can copy it, that's a little harder. And chances are the one you want is not going to be the one you find at the moment you need it. That's just research 101, in my opinion. But I am currently screen sharing from the site Weird Medieval Guys, and they're describing some things going on in medieval manuscripts. So these are some various pieces from different manuscripts that they've thought were amusing. This first one here, we see people attacking snails. This one that I'm hovering over, that's more of a later period, specific drawings of people, very realistic style. And then the one above it, rabbits fighting each other, one of them riding on a snail that has a man's head. This motif of fighting snails, knights fighting snails, people riding snails, this comes over and over and over. Nobody that I know of has found a definitive, this is the reason for it. And I don't feel like there needs to be a reason. We come up with things that seem funny. If you think of some of the modern things like Grumpy Cat or whatever, they catch our amusement. Other people like them, people start adding them. So snails are one of the things you're going to see a lot. You're also going to see some various grotesques. So a grotesque is anything that is a creature or human creature mixture or creature action mixture. And what I mean by creature action is you can see this one here that looks like the tail and legs of something that might be a lizard or a dragon or something, ending in a hand that might be human if it didn't have what seems to be a few too many fingers holding an axe, with the idea that perhaps it beheaded itself, or who knows. Then above it here, we've got this boar that is wearing a pair of pants. So some of this back and forth play with animals doing human things, again, over here in the snails with rabbits riding them into combat. Um, that's very common in illumination and in specifically in marginals. Scrolling down, we've got another example. In this case, somebody with a spear fighting a snail, and some grotesques, this little dwarf or short person with a beard, a probably sheep playing music. All of these are things that you're going to see. One of the really cool things that you can do here when you are doing a scroll for someone, if you know them personally, this is a great place to put in some of the things they like. Do they have a dog or a cat that you could draw in here? Do they have a particular interest in always having the latest and greatest outfits, and you can have a person wearing maybe an outfit they have or looking at a rack of tons of clothing? Do you want to step across that border into more of the creative side rather than the historical side and put an image of their Jeep or their air fryer or something that is meaningful to them? Go ahead. This, in my opinion, and when you're doing a scroll, you do it as you see fit, as works for you, but my opinion is it's not the right place to put something just because they happen to have it. So if you're doing an air fryer just because that guy owns an air fryer, that doesn't make sense. But if this guy is regularly hosting different um, A&S nights for the Shire and is always whipping up some goodies with the air fryer. A little Marginalia bit of a guy standing at a table, maybe a very medieval look, guy in medieval clothing, cooking it with an air fryer, taking out some snacks. That would be perfect. So you're going to see things that are, along those lines, telling stories or just adding in space. You're also going to see a lot of people without their clothes on. And so this is where, when I mentioned previously, kind of the realm of taste and what's appropriate to the populace. If you're doing this one-to-one, you're doing, say, a poem for somebody, do whatever works for them. If you are doing a scroll, keep in mind that this is the words of the king and queen, or the prince and princess, or the baron and baroness. And regardless of what was considered appropriate in the Middle Ages, which had a much stronger sense of the human body and the fact that under your clothes people are naked. Is this appropriate for the scroll? That does not mean we have to be prudes and make sure everybody's buttoned up. It does not even mean we can't put a naked guy hanging out, but it's something to think about. But as you are looking at these, you will see naked images throughout. And then you're going to see things like this one, where we've got a guy who is hanging on to part of a border. It looks like a kind of a border bit that has an illuminated initial. And then he's got some sort of snake or dragon eating his foot or chewing on his foot. So this is one of those places where we look at this picture and say, okay, what's the border? What's the marginalia? What's the illuminated letter? It's not going to necessarily be specific. I would say that this part here that looks like maybe a G, if that is a G, would be a letter inside a border, and that's pretty common. And then the border ending in a person hanging on to it, that person is becoming part of that marginalia. But you do not have to agree with my definition there. This is one that they describe here, that this is one of the ones that fits in my category of meaningful. And that is because it relates to the verse, "The Gentiles have stuck fast in the destruction which they have prepared. Their foot hath been taken in the very snare which they hid." So we've got a creature attacking somebody's foot right in the section after that text from Psalm 9 describing somebody's foot getting caught in the snare that they hid for themselves. This is a great example of those parts that are meaningful to, in this case, the text. We've got another example of that here on the same page. We're still in the Weird Medieval Guys page here. Part of Psalm 5 has, "Give ear, O Lord, to my words, understand my cry." And we have two guys wrestling. One is trying to steal the other's ears. So this is where we get a lot of that play on words with when we say "give ear, O Lord," we're saying, hear what I'm talking about. But instead, we've got somebody taking that person's ears. These are the types of things that were really enjoyed throughout the Middle Ages, or only the scribes enjoyed it, but we're presuming that people in the Middle Ages enjoyed that kind of wordplay. And it is fine to do that with things that you are doing in scrolls that you're writing. So I'm trying to think of some things that come to mind, but if you have, say, a scroll that's describing diverse efforts, and the word diverse can be spelled two ways. If it's spelled with an E at the end, it means a wide variety. If we spell it more like divers, then we're talking not about so much the variety, but many efforts. If I were to decide that I have a little bit of space here and putting somebody standing, getting ready to dive into water, or it looks like they're swimming down through something, because diverse and divers, haha, wordplay, go for it. Great. Is everybody going to understand that? Maybe, maybe not, and that is okay too. People do not always have to understand what your meaning was, although you may discover that you are describing it to them, and that is, again, just fine. We have a second page here, and then I'll pause for a few questions before we move on to some of the next part. This particular page is by the itinerantscribe.com, and this is again a page about marginalia. So when we are looking here, we've got some images like a guy in a boat, and then coming down to rabbits. And this is one that this particular page, the reason I'm using this as an example that's got many of our different pieces of marginalia is because this one has collected some of the most common tropes. So rabbits doing human things, treating humans as animals, um, rabbits with weapons, rabbits playing instruments. That's a major one. Later period, we also see cats. Cats tend to be shown doing more cat-like things, chasing mice, washing their tails, although we do see some in a couple manuscripts that are seen playing a ton of different instruments. We've got this kind of classic one, a nun who is picking penises off of a tree. So when you talk about kind of the naughty marginalia, of all of them that I'm aware of, this one comes back again and again and again that people will comment on it. What is the reason for it? This is one that people will talk about kind of why, what was going on. Nobody seems to have a specific, like this relating to a particular story. Was there a funny joke going around? Was there something that happened in politics or news? Possibly, or possibly somebody just decided that that was funny to put in there. All right, so moving to the next section, and actually with that peekaboo bit, since you've mentioned that there in the comments, I'm going to share an image. I just did a quick search. So there you go. This little bit here where we see a dragon's head, this is a hole where either they scraped too thin or because parchment is from the actual hide of an actual animal that could have had heaven knows what, it's not going to be perfectly uniform. And they ran with it and made it this little peekaboo. So you've got this kind of 2-for-1 illumination with the dragon from the next page showing through that hole. There are other ways that holes were mended, including with embroidery thread, and that kind of is outside the scope of today's class. But yes, taking those what would be flaws and using them to your advantage is another way that marginalia was used. Moving on to words. These are one of my favorite bits, and they're used in several different ways. The first one is to guide or direct. And of course, I had a image here getting ready for class, and now I'm trying to figure out where it went. I will describe it while I get that page up here for us. So when you are looking at images in a web page, in a book on medieval art, something of that nature, and you see a arrow or a hand or something of that type pointing in a particular direction, that's not just there for art, although sometimes people have gotten very clever with how it's added. That is there to kind of point out something you need to know. So that can be used several ways. One way is, hey, we ran out of space on this line and we wrote it over here to the side. That can be a game changer when you're trying to fit all the words into your nicely laid out scroll, and then you realize that you went from the end of this line to the beginning of that line and you left out a couple of words, or it took you a little more space to write something than you had anticipated with, if you're me, writing it out in pencil and then going over it with your pen. You can, it is absolutely period, it works just fine. Do a little arrow or a person with a bow and arrow or a person with a sword or just a hand with a finger pointing, and put those words off to the side, mixed in with some acanthus leaves or just to the edge of the border or whatever you want. You can also do that with comments about the person. Hopefully these would be positive comments. So for example, let's say we're doing a scroll for someone who's getting a services award, and our scrolls will often read something like, for his continued service to the barony of wherever and such. If you want to put a little arrow coming out from that that says, including hosting the king and queen at his home numerous times, staying and washing dishes, finding silverware and a cup for someone who was visiting, and write those nicely on the side, that's an amazing spot. It doesn't work in the text very well, but putting that little description out to the side and just having a little pointer going to it, or you might just put the words there, but since they kind of be following from the sentence. You can also have comments. This is where you see those glosses. So a gloss would be where somebody else has come in and written their thoughts, or they have described how this relates to another story, another piece of history, another Bible verse. There are some images here. This one is medieval books.nl, and then specifically getting personal in the margin is the name of this particular page. And so we see here a gentleman with a spear, and the spear is pointing to some words that are much smaller than the rest of the text. So that is where we've got both image and word marginalia. We've got the guy with the spear is a bit of marginalia on his own, and then the spear is pointing to those extra words. We also see that he's got this kind of long ribbon or possibly a belt. It kind of goes, looks like it attaches maybe to a sash or belt around his waist, but it's hard to see for sure. But it's got some written things there. You will find words written on long ribbons or sometimes wrapped around items. Now, this is not when words are written in the shape of a tree or an animal. That's a different thing. But where you just have a short few words, maybe a sentence, kind of off to the side somewhere in the illumination, that is a type of that written marginalia. We have next an example of just a finger that's pointing to something important. So just right at the edge of the page, somebody's arm comes out, elbow bends, and there's their finger pointing to the thing that is relevant. They call this one a manicula, like manicure or manipulate. Manicula is Latin for little hand. And these give us some information on kind of a look here. This is what we're looking at. It can also be showing you the way to, hey, we put some of the other information over here. This one, they had several. So this person has grown some incredibly long fingers. You can see that they've got 4 fingers pointing at different things in the manuscript as long as they needed them to be. You can also see that there are some words coming along inside of this sleeve. So things written in the illumination pointing to other words. And then again, we have a gloss or an addition here that's in smaller writing than the other. From the same text, we have a squid or possibly octopus. Each of its tentacles is coming and pointing to a particular line that they felt was important for us to look at. And this one, if you look closely, you can see that there are some tiny little words written in between the lines. The little words written in between the lines are not marginalia. They are another good way if you have just a word missing in your text, or even just a letter. You can put just a little tiny mark that just says, hey, come up here, like you would when you were, if you were correcting, and you can even do it with a different color ink, and you don't have to scrape and you don't have to try to put that back in. But you could also, if it's not going to fit there, you can make it part of that marginalia. You could even really emphasize it. Let's say that you're writing a word and you forget a letter that's in the middle. You might have a little line coming over to the edge to say, hey, look here, and make that letter big and fancy. Hey, you screwed up, own it, appreciate it. You don't have to, but you can. We've got here just an image where somebody's written something down here at the bottom. In this particular one, it appears that somebody did not like the translation. So what is written here translates to whoever translated these Gospels did a very poor job. So those critiques and comments, whether it was from the person doing this or from a later reader, we get those. I would not advise saying whoever translated this scroll did a poor job, but you could use other things like we've been appreciating this person's art for a long time, giving a scroll to an artisan, or you might use marginalia to put something like the done this day if you're having a hard time fitting all that in, just to write it slightly smaller, having a little pointer or something going out to it. And then down here, this one, you can see that there is space that has been kind of ruled out and quite a bit written. So towards the right-hand column, we've got the actual illumination and border and written words of that manuscript. And then that space to the side has things written in where other readers or scholars went ahead and wrote things that were relevant. So that's a very significant piece of that intending that things are going to be added to the margins. I think that is all there on that page about things added to the margins. My favorite, and yes, please feel free to take this idea and run with it if you want to. One of the things that you find in written marginalia is comments from the scribes themselves on what was going on. If you have one of those days where what you really want to say is, I'm tired, but I finished the scroll on time, or I had to open 2 new bottles of ink to get this done or something. Yeah, you can write that as part of your written marginalia, and people may enjoy it. Or you're doing this for a friend. Congratulations, I appreciate you. Some of the things that were listed in official medieval manuscripts, and I think all the scribes here are going to appreciate many of these. New parchment, bad ink, I say nothing more. I am very cold. That's a hard page and a weary work to read it. Let the reader's voice honor the writer's pen. This page has not been written very slowly. The parchment is hairy. The ink is thin. Thank God it will soon be dark. So for the people who got to stop working on that once the light was too dim to write, we've all been at that. Thank goodness I get it. I need a break soon. Along with, oh my hand, writing is excessive drudgery. It crooks your back, it dims your sight, it twists your stomach and sides. St. Patrick of Armagh, deliver me from writing. And my very favorite one, now I've written the whole thing, for Christ's sake, give me a drink. There are others. This is just a little selection of them. You can see more of them in the page Medieval Musings in the Margins. This is from Evangelical Textual Criticism in Blogspot, and I am going to go ahead and put the website for that particular one into the chat there because I really appreciate those comments and some of the ones that I didn't share with you guys. It is okay as long as it is very clear that this is a marginal piece. This is not something that is part of the official scroll. To put, I have finished, my hand hurts, or the ink was too thin, or whatever frustrating or interesting thought that you had, as long as it's something that you would feel comfortable with people saying in court. If it's something that's private, one-to-one, just between you and the person receiving it, it shouldn't be going on your scroll because this is something that hopefully they're going to hang up and put in a place of honor in their home, and it'll be showed in court and everything. If you choose to write some marginalia of your own, make sure that first it is not someplace where it looks like it's a continuation of the text. So that might be that it is outside of a border. It might be that it is written in a direction like vertically or at an angle. Writing it with a different color ink can be helpful. Often these things are written in much smaller text and with a less formal hand. So it's not that it's unreadable, but if you're doing something like a very formal Gothic, a textura quadrata type thing, you might go into more of a Batard or other kind of more flowing one if you're going to write a little marginal line of any type. You may put it, like some of the images I showed, inside somebody's sleeve, inside the feather of a bird. inside a little ribbon. The more you're aware of this, the more you will see this as you're looking. Does it count as marginalia if this is a ribbon that's going right through the middle of something, or written inside somebody's sleeve, and that sleeve is part of a central piece? Yes and no. It's incidental to the full piece of artwork. So in that sense, it's marginal. It's not in the margin. So that could be determined either way. Also, whether you should add it there or whether it should be to the side. So should it be part of the illumination? Should it be added to the side? That's going to depend on your particular style. The insular Celtic type stuff, you don't see very much written marginalia at all, let alone as part of the overall design. In Gothic art, you see it all over the place. In art done in the Middle East, and I am not any kind of expert on it, but in the Middle East, everything that is written, from what I know, tends to be part of the overall image. There's a lot more writing that forms different shapes and patterns in and of itself. So if you're doing a Middle Eastern style scroll and want to add marginalia, I would say ask somebody who knows a lot about what's going on there. When I'm referring to this, my kind of area of competence is more in Europe. So Gothic, the insular or Celtic stuff, some of the stuff extending to Russia, um, down through Italy, Spain, that kind of thing. We will see either marginal art or marginal words or both in those. The final part we are going to go into just some things to know and to note. First one, research, in my opinion, is amazing. It is not at all hard, as I said, to find information just by doing a Google search, and you'll also find many SCAAdians who are interested in the scribal arts will have things like Pinterest pages or blogs or such things. So doing a search for marginal artwork, marginalia, medieval marginalia, some of those different kinds of keywords will find you a ton of stuff. I like to trace things back to what was the original item. If somebody says snails are common, I want to see a picture of a illuminated page with a snail. If somebody says that there was a comment from a scribe that says new parchment, bad ink, I say nothing more. I'd like to know, where was that in? What language was it originally written in? Where does that show up on the page? The best way to do that is looking stuff up and then checking to see how it relates to what you're doing. So just like with garb or anything else where we're trying to kind of stick with a theme, it is okay to step outside and put that creative bit in. It's, in my opinion, again, this is very highlighted, my opinion, not as okay to be strongly mixing times and places that don't go together. So what I mean by that is if you've got the guy that shows up to every single event in his beloved Jeep and has helped 15 people in the barony move using his Jeep and has pulled a couple of people's cars out of a muddy patch using his Jeep, and you want to put that Jeep in as part of your Marginalia art, beautiful. Go for it. If you're hoping to be able to put an interesting piece of writing on a nice flowy ribbon, and the style of illumination you're doing does not have words on nice flowy ribbons, I would recommend not doing it there and finding a different way to put in your writing or your image. Doesn't mean you can't put the same information, just kind of how does this fit with what's going on? And the way to do that is going back and looking at the pictures of the pages that were done. Next part, of course, if you can't find what it is, ask somebody else. Have you seen anything that's got some words? Have you seen anything where how they would put in pictures like this? When you are considering the whole thing, um, if you know things you would like to put in. So I did a scroll once. I really wish that I had saved the photographs. I photographed it extensively. I have no idea where the photographs are. But I did one that I intended to have a lot of written marginalia. So it's going through the text and it lists the person's name, and I had a little bit pointing off this way that says what his name means because the recipient had chosen their SCA name because it specifically meant something about them. So I have, and their name means this. And then we go down a bit farther and it says some of the things they did. And I have a little bit coming off, they started their scribal work in this year. So that I was able to set that out as part of my layout. I'm going to have these little pieces in these places. If this is something that comes up later that you're just about done and you realize like, I've done this great scroll, but it didn't really refer to just how cool it is that this person has stepped up and helped with the dishes every single time there's a feast. That one, look at what you've got, look at where your spaces are, see how you can make that fit. It's going to be up to you on what having that, how that fit looks like, or up to you and a friend. So this is where, yes, we keep what we're working on secret until it's given out, but you can choose your kingdom or baronial scribe or a friend or mentor who can keep a secret and ask them to look over anything you're doing. If you need a second viewpoint or a what color should I do this, and to have them do something like, yeah, I think you do have space, or I don't know, I think that's going to look kind of weird there. You may be okay with it being weird. There are examples where both written and drawn bits of marginalia were definitely put in because somebody felt that it was important to put it there and it was not at all part of that original layout. So that part is up to you. It may be that it goes under the frame and that's okay. You just have a little line of writing that you and the recipient know is there, and once they've got it framed and hung up, nobody sees it, and that's all right. It is okay with your illumination to have illuminated marginalia that's using the same colors, same um, array of colors as the rest of your illumination, and that's part of where we say, it can be hard to tell if something's the official marginal part or if it's some other bit. It is also okay, as we saw in some of these drawings, to make it a little bit less saturated, that it might be outlined and just highlighted with a little bit of red or a little bit of blue or something, and not fully colored in like the rest of the piece would be. That's going to depend on when you look at other things from the time period or other things that are done in that that manuscript. What do you see? What's done? And what do you like? What fits? What makes sense to you? When you have a scroll where you have too much space, marginalia is your friend. Most people I know tend to lean the other direction. They're trying to get all the words in there and they're trying to make it look good and they want some pretty stuff. But sometimes you've put in the pretty things and you've put in the words and it's all looking good and you've got this space. That is where drawing something can really make it look finished and complete. Often we see that at the bottom or possibly along the right-hand side, places where you might not have kind of put something in until the end. What do you put in? So this would not be one where you knew you wanted to put in a picture of somebody's horse or their truck, or you wanted a comment. First idea, flip through, look for things in period text. Add some rabbits, add some snails. If it's a fighter, add a couple people fighting. If it's a service award, what are they getting a service award for? If it's A&S, what kinds of things do they do? Do we have a picture of somebody singing? Do we have a picture of somebody sewing? If you're not good at drawing people, can you draw a rack with clothing hanging on it or a couple musical instruments? The very best way, in my opinion, to totally appreciate and know what to put in for marginalia is what I consider the immersion method. And this happens kind of spontaneously if you have ever had a break in whatever's going on in your mundane life, maybe time between the last semester or whatever of one set of classes and the beginning of the next, if you're a student or a teacher, or you've taken off some time to work on things before going to the big event or something, and you are sewing and you are doing scrolls and you are helping your household and everything is SCA, 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 and you're staying up a little bit too late, it is all of a sudden your brain kind of starts going into this, it makes total sense to put snails and rabbits and cats and whatever all over this. I honestly recommend that people try that at some point if you can. If you can take a week or two and focus just on doing your SCA things, making scrolls, making garb, making jewelry, whatever you do, and doing quite a bit of scribal work in there, the way that you look at it changes because that's what you're focusing on. So at those points, it may seem very logical to put any number of artistic pieces in there. When we're doing our kind of switching back and forth from mundane world to SCA world, finishing work, come home, spend an hour on this scroll, that's often when it seems harder to think of what's going to go in that place. If you have any idea of who the person is, what they like, uh, what's gone on their Facebook, what they've talked about with friends, any of that, that can make for a really personalized scroll, like cockatiels and cockatiel footprints, or that they're getting it at the end of summer and they've been talking about how many squashes their garden produced, or that they're known for always wearing green or something. Those are details that really work well as parts of marginalia. They're not specific to the scroll, and they're likely not what the person is officially getting the award for, but they really matter, along with people's pets, people's household members. You might do just a picture of them sitting and talking to somebody, um, things that they like. If that person loves unicorns or cats or whatever, anything that is on their device. You do not have to use their specific device in the illumination unless you are doing a scroll that has their device added, but you can take whatever pieces of it, chess figures or horses or trees or whatever, and those make great pieces in that marginalia if you are kind of doing this, I need to put stuff in, or if you're wanting to put personalization in. There are a couple of good references. There's a book that I like a lot called Images in the Margins, and it is by Margot Nishimura. So I'm going to write that down in here in the chat. Images in the margins by Margot Nishimura. That is one of the books that I would recommend. I really like that one. There are also books about medieval beasts, medieval monsters, medieval drawings, and of course, any book that is a replica or has specific printed images of the folios of a particular medieval manuscript or particular styles. So one that has, say, early Gothic manuscripts or late medieval Italian manuscripts or something. Looking at those is always the best. And then, of course, being able to log on to any museum that has scanned and put their manuscript pages online, that can give you tons of rabbit holes to dive down, give you a lot of different ideas of things to add onto your scrolls. So, yeah. Is there anything that you guys need to know? We are pretty much at the end of the information that I had today, so I appreciate you guys listening to this, and anybody who has any comments for me, any things that you would like, if you were to listen to this in the future or somebody else were to take it, what information you'd want, let me know. I will let us stop the recording so that scribes can just talk about anything and everything. I'll still hang out here a bit and chat. It has been a pleasure talking to you all.